Hi there, it's Dr. William Curtis. I'm coming to you today to talk to you about an extremely important topic that I run into every single day in the clinic. In fact, if I had to make a guess, I would say that 85 to 90% of the medical problems that I treat in my clinic are in some way attributable to the topic of stress. That might seem fantastic, like that can't be true, but the reality is stress and what I define as stress has a series of events and effects on the human body. And I think that it's an important topic that we cover so that you understand the ways that stress can affect the body and perhaps things you can do about it to improve that. Because if it's 85%, 90% of the things that I treat in a clinic, I would love to see my patients start implementing stress reduction techniques and so that they can minimize the medical problems that they have in the future. So before we get too far along, this is the second in a webinar series, and I thank you for joining me for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this presentation on the topic of stress and stress reduction. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A, and I'll do the best I can to answer as many questions as possible in this capacity. I hope this is valuable. You'll leave comments and let me know if this is something you'd like to see more of in the future. So the first thing I want you to understand is, what is stress? When I say stress, people often have all kinds of things pop into their head, like what they think that means. But to me, I want you to know that I believe that stress means a physiologic change. It's a chemical, hormonal change that occurs in the body due to several things. I'll divide these into physical, mental, and maybe spiritual. There are some overlaps, but in general, they'll fall into these categories. The first is physical stress. Physical stress can be an injury. If you break your leg and it's swollen and inflamed and it's trying to heal, that's a stress. That's stressful. The body has to create resources to repair that tissue, so that's a stressor. Surgery, same reason. Any kind of physical abuse, some type of injury to the body or ongoing physical abuse. Exercise, chemicals, whether that be stimulants, alcohol, drugs, environmental exposures. These are all physical things that the body has to deal with by hormonal change, by upregulating your metabolism, things like that. Lack of sleep. Any kind of lack of sleep is stressful to the body. I've often told my patients that anybody awake past 11 p.m., shift workers, night owls, anything past 11 p.m. at night, in between the hours of about 7 to 8 a.m., if you're awake during those hours, it tends to be raised cortisol levels, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Because one of the things that happens when I say stress, and I'm describing a couple versions of that, is that we get these hormonal changes. Another would be pain, any type of pain. So there's people that I see in clinic that have chronic back pain, maybe from prior injuries, things like that. The fact that they have ongoing pain is stressful, and I'll explain why. Mental stressors. These can be relationship problems, financial, social, dynamics, relationship dynamics, work, lack of respect, social injustices, childhood experiences, traumatic kind of social childhood experiences, emotional abuse, things like that, lack of opportunity, miscommunication, misunderstandings that affect us and our emotions, and also media. I think when we see, I've written and posted a lot about topics related to how the media, I'm talking about both social media and video and TV and news and things like that, how it can affect your psyche and your mental health. And one of the ways it does that is through the idea of stress. Then there's spiritual things that are stressful. I think just a lack of a spiritual life. I think there's adequate evidence, and most people intuitively understand this, that if you don't have a sort of higher purpose, if you're just running around trying to make ends meet and you don't really have a real purpose to what you're doing, you don't have a higher purpose that you serve, I think that people have a void there. And I've seen how you can have your health, your fitness, your nutrition dialed in, but yet people still develop mental and emotional issues because their spiritual life is a wreck. They have past traumas, abuse as children. They harbor regret, anger, resentment, any version of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. Anytime in life can lead to the spiritual injury, if you will, that makes people have responses of stress, exploitation, neglect, real or imagined. These are all things that can trigger stress. So let me describe, now that I've given you a few ideas, so you understand what we're going to encompass, what stress physically does and why we care. So one of the first things is that whether it's a thought, an injury, pain, any of these types of things, whenever you have stress, as I've defined it, there's a hormone called cortisol that rises. Cortisol lives high in your above your kidney. It's created in the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands secrete cortisol, which is our fight or flight or stress hormone. So let's say your boss comes in and yells at you, or you have a fight with your spouse, or you drink too much alcohol, or you have an injury to your leg. Cortisol rises, and what it does is it prepares the body for a fight or flight scenario. So what happens is cortisol surges through your body. It raises your heart rate, raises your blood pressure. It tells the liver, hey liver, you're storing sugar. Let's dump it out into the bloodstream so that we can have energy in our muscles to fight or flee. When that happens, you get a surge of sugar in the bloodstream. Then in turn, insulin rises. Insulin, you remember, stores fat and lowers blood sugar. When that happens, we store that fat in our midsection. That's why people that are under high stress, they can try to eat right and exercise, and sometimes they gain weight anyway. Lots of us have experienced this. But lots of us experience that physiologic change that's caused by having cortisol high. Now, cortisol has some good effects. It prepares you to fight or flight. So if you're got attacked by a mugger and you need to punch him in the nose and run for it, great. If he cut you with a knife and you need your immune system to help your body fight off infection and heal that wound, well, that's a good thing. And that happens whenever cortisol rises in a very short period of time. But what happens in the modern world is the saber-toothed tiger, the mugger, is living in the room with us 24/7. We're constantly subjected to real or imagined stress. We have, as I mentioned, social media stressors. We have all types of complex financial and social structures that are constantly pulling and weighing on our attention. We keep activities that keep us up all night and all hours of the day because of electricity. We're not at sleep at night. We're distracted by so many things that we don't take care of our health. And so what happens is cortisol stays high all the time. And this is where the negative effects come in. Negative effects of high cortisol can show memory changes. You can have digestive problems. You can have a suppressed immune system, so you get sick more often. High blood pressure. How many of you have essential high blood pressure? Have you ever heard that term? Oh, you have high blood pressure. Most of the time, it's because your cortisol levels are high all the time. And we have to treat it with medications to lower your blood pressure symptom, but the real deeper layer might be underlying inactivity and high stress and in turn high cortisol. So racing heart, anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, chronic immune suppression, even Alzheimer's, cancer, and multiple neurologic disorders are associated with chronic high stress. So this is why I say it's so common in my clinic. There's so many things are at least related to this. If you, that's the Western perspective, the things that are associated with stress. Think about what the Eastern philosophy of medicine says. And now, I'm not an Eastern practitioner, but I study complementary medicine, alternative medicine. I certainly have explored that area a bit. This might be termed as blocked qi. In qigong, they have qi and energy flow and all these kind of things. That's what they would describe this. They would say they're stagnant organs, perhaps. They might say stress would cause pain or emotion to be stored in your tissues. In other words, people that get a real tense neck, that can be stored emotion or stress from your accumulated through your life that can be stored there. This is kind of an Eastern philosophy of how the body works. You can have an unhappy energy. You can have a negative spirit, negative attitude, these types of things. These are all things that, more of an alternative, holistic approach would show as a sign of stress, or would call a sign of stress. So I hope I painted the picture that there's very important reasons to address stress, to get to the source of why it's happening, because there's so many medical problems associated with it. And even if you can't fix every stress in your life, just addressing it and being aware of it is half the battle. So I want to talk about a few key solutions. Now, there are a lot of solutions here, okay? But I'm going to go through some of the key ones, and I'm hoping somebody has some questions that we can, kind of cover this a little bit more. And I have already written multiple articles, which I will link in this at the end of this video and during the webinar. I will go ahead and link some of those so you can go do some more detailed reading. In particular, one of them is an article on stress I wrote several years ago, but it sort of stands the test of time because it explains the reason why stress is hormones are released, and then I've also got some articles that are very detailed on how you can reverse stress. But I'm going to go through some of those right now, and then we'll do a Q&A towards the end. The first thing I think is a big solution or helps with stress is physical activity. The human body was meant to move at least 12 miles a day. We are physically aerobic and strong creatures capable of covering long distances. When we are stagnant, our brain, our mind, and our hormones are stagnant. When we are stagnant, in particular when we're active, it releases tension in our muscle. It limbers us. It gets us moving. And that's why anything that increases your physical activity can make a huge difference in the experience of stress. People who run or do aerobic activities vigorously often notice that they're stressed. It's hard for them to get stressed because their muscles have been moved and they've been exhausted and wrung out of all those stress hormones. Exercise tends to do that. It helps you move and get the stiff joints moving, which often is a place where we store negative energy. Sometimes it also can actually physically help your body pump out toxins that are stored in fat tissue and distributed throughout your body. It lowers tension, releases endorphins. That's another good one. So remember, we talked about cortisol, a stress hormone, but when you exercise vigorously, it releases the feel-good repair hormones we call endorphins. This is like your body's natural morphine. So if you have tension and pain due to chronic stress, these types of things can be released and improved by being physically active. The problem is you just got to get out and do it. So regular physical activity also lowers blood pressure, lowers heart rate, improves fitness, decreases incidence of heart disease and stroke, on and on and on. There's so many positives, including weight loss and improved diabetic control and all the things I've covered in my Killing Diabetes program. So the idea I'm trying to make out is exercise is a great first step for someone trying to reverse the signs and symptoms of stress. You start where you are with what you got when you can. Ideally would be 45 minutes to an hour daily, 4 to 5 days a week of something aerobic, let's say, to start with, like walking or cycling or stationary bike or hiking. Keep in mind there's other really good ones that are sort of a combination of mind, body, spiritual, sort of complex exercise. First on my list would be yoga. And yoga is a very well-respected, very effective tool for helping people get centered with meditation, breathing, and physical movement. So that's one that's in there as well. Qigong, Tai Chi. Keep in mind these are all ancient and sometimes Eastern martial arts that have stood the test of time because they work. And they treat the body through the combination of breathing and movement to improve physiology internally. So think about those, and those are available everywhere. And they don't have to take large amounts of time, but when a person adds those to their life daily, it can make a big difference in lowering the effects of stress. So let's talk about mental solutions. First thing, I guess key things. Complex, but at least start accepting or assessing toxic relationships. You need to start looking at your interactions with people. So let's say you have someone that you typically hang out with that brings out the worst in you or agitates you or causes a great deal of stress. If this is a person you don't absolutely have to deal with, We've all got, we've had friends that aren't not good for us or that bring out the worst in us. Exit those situations. Just decide to spend less and less time with toxic situations. People who gossip, people who are angry or upset. These things, these emotions are stressful. And sometimes people will dump their stress on you. Wonder who's experienced that before. And when that happens, you will absorb some of that. You can't knock it all off. And so what ends up happening is you start absorbing some of their problems. So look at toxic relationships. Read positive material daily. Now I've listed this on my the article I wrote on stress reduction techniques, which I'll list at the end. But there's lots of great websites. I like a guy named jamesclear.com. He also recently wrote a book called Atomic Habits. I like a guy's blog called Positivity. The Positivity blog is what it's called. Positivity.com. And this guy puts out some daily short blog piece that you can read in 1 to 2 minutes. That's just a bit of positive emotion, a positive thought. It's like taking a pill for your brain where you're putting in a positive thought. That positive thought becomes a positive emotion. The positive emotion changes ever so slightly how your hormones are released to the body, i.e. it lowers stress. It's always good to put something positive in. Think longer thoughts. Turn off Facebook, turn off Twitter, turn off things that are stealing your attention. Spend time doing things that allow you to expand your own thoughts. Sit quietly in nature. It's okay to do these things and spend time doing nothing sometimes. A little bit of quiet time can go a long ways. Consider counseling if you feel like if you've got a lot of complex relationships, a lot of complex social and emotional history. Sometimes meeting with a counselor can go a long ways. Sometimes helping learn or reading self-help books where you can learn new communication techniques goes a long way to lowering the stress of certain types of relationships or situations that you might face in life. But if you just kind of go through the world bumping into the walls and not really addressing communication issues or conflict resolution techniques, there's so much written about this type of stuff out there. If you're struggling with that, that's a source of stress for you. Go out and look for things like that. And I certainly have listed things like that in several of my articles that I'll list for you. Explore new habits. Read about habits. There's a couple cool books out. One written by Matt Duhigg recently called The Power of Habits, and I mentioned already Atomic Habits by James Clear. These are both great on audiobook, and they teach you how to change habits and how to take better control of your life. And these are all things that we struggle with mentally, and that leads to internal stress, which again causes all the symptoms we already described. The next section I would say is spiritual solutions. I believe in, although you may, not believe the same way, I believe in prayer. I think there's good double-blind placebo-controlled trials that prayer helps people. They've got science that shows that. I don't need that proof, but I believe, based on personal experience and that of my patients, that prayer has a positive effect on people's lives. And I think that's because God has a positive effect on people's lives. And that spiritual pursuit and that service of others and a higher purpose translates into a more centered, calm being, a person who has less anxiety, less tendency towards stress. When one is able to rely on a higher power for certain things that are just outside of our control, there's a great sense of relief, comfort, and security. Think about that. That's not your flavor. Consider meditation. Meditation, transcendental meditation is easy. There's lots of apps out there. I always recommend Headspace, which is a little app you can get on your cell phone. Basically, you click on it, select the time you want to do, and it talks you through a quiet transcendental meditation process, which I can say, because I've done it quite a bit, the more you meditate, the more insights you get into your life, the more peace you feel, the more you're able to weather conflict and stressful situations without getting that physical reaction to stress that we're trying to avoid that causes so many medical problems. So think about meditation. Headspace is a good one there. One of my favorites, spend quiet time in nature. There's a lot of science that the Earth has a specific electromagnetic field associated with it. We are part of that. When you walk in grass with no shoes on, or you're out in nature, sometimes you feel that real peaceful feeling. I know recently I was in the redwood forest, and when you walked deep into the forest, there was a heavy, not negative, but a heavy, clean, calm sensation amongst these giant trees. And I firmly believe that that is what many researchers describe as the grounding effect that the Earth has, especially in quiet areas that are dense and out in the deep nature. I routinely try to experience that myself because it is you can't help but feel calmer. There's less of that tendency to have the feelings of stress rise when you've spent some quiet time just breathing and existing in nature. So meditation, prayer, quiet time in nature. Avoid negative places, people, and environments. You ever been in an environment that, I don't know, it could just be the paint on the wall or the music or a work environment that's excessively stressful or where you just get a bad vibe. Anytime you're in these types of scenarios, another good one is clutter. Like if you're in a cluttered area, these are things that draw our energy, and they also trigger the subtle release of cortisol and stress. Always try to place yourself in the most centering, most healthy environment possible if you can, because that's going to help you physically, spiritually, and mentally. This is kind of a combination one, but these are things that are very, very important to be aware of your surroundings. Your surroundings can affect how you react to the world. Another big one I mentioned decreasing clutter is serving others. Often when we have a lot of personal problems and we're feeling very tied up with stress and keyed up, serving others is a way to put your troubles behind you, focus on someone else, do some good, make the world a little better with your activity. And when doing that, that tends to lower cortisol. I've seen that in a lot of different readings that I've done on the topic of stress and wellness. They talk about the idea of serving others. And the other big one that I'll tie in right near the end of this list of different solutions for stress is practicing forgiveness. This is a really, really important thing that if you have anger, resentment, if you have emotional injuries, or if you have things that you harbor on a day-to-day basis, grudges, if you will. Lots of examples could be given through the Bible, and probably in your everyone has. I've got personal experiences of how those things just rob your vitality and your health. They in a subtle way are highly associated with stress, highly associated with all the heart disease and cancer. And there's so many readings. I could go on and on and on about this topic of the idea of harboring resentment. And I think that by practicing having a forgiving spirit, spending a little time thinking, spending your day with an intention in the morning, saying, I'm going to spend today, I'm not going to be angry, I'm going to try to seek the best in people on a day-to-day basis. If anyone wrongs me, I'm going to forgive them and not take that with me through the day, holding a grudge, because that hurts me. And that's kind of you can kind of sit and make intentions that way at the start of the day. So quick summary, and then I'm going to direct you to some of the other articles I've written on these topics. I talked about the causes of stress, the various causes. I talked about what exactly stress is. Remember, it's a chemical, hormonal event that occurs. It's not just something that's between your ears or some kind of nebulous thing out there that we don't really understand. It's a very real chemical event that causes diseases, as I mentioned, all the different things that cortisol is associated with, ranging from fibromyalgia to cancer to heart disease to high blood pressure to memory problems, even early Alzheimer's disease, much more associated with high stress. I also mentioned multiple physical, mental, and spiritual ways to reverse stress, or at least acknowledge and seek out solutions for how to reduce stress. I talked about physical activity was a big one. I talked about maybe counseling, assessing toxic relationships, um, looking for positive downloads, and looking for associating yourself with positive people, avoiding negative people. I talked about prayer, meditation, spending time in nature. We talked about decreasing your environmental clutter and the quality of the environment that you live and work in. We talked about serving others and practicing forgiveness. Um, Very complex topic. I think each one of these, and maybe we'll do this if there's enough interest, maybe I'll do a whole nother topic on each of these individual topics combined, physical solutions for stress, mental solutions for stress. Maybe we'll go through those individually at some point or answer some of those questions now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this presentation, and then I'm going to be available for Q&A if you're available for this live webinar. And otherwise, if you've seen this video, just leave your questions in the comments below, and I'll do the best I can to answer those. And if anybody has other suggestions, things they prefer, feel free to share those as well. So I hope this brief presentation on stress and how it can affect your health is useful for you. And I hope that you will take some initiative yourself to pick something you think you can do that means the most to you, and start applying that on a daily basis. We'll put it into your schedule. I've got this to-do list thing that I keep that says top things and priorities, tasks that must be absolutely done today. Why don't you take that, write down one of these stress reduction techniques, and let that be, hey, look, I'm going to at least do this one thing today. I'm going to go for that walk out at the park so that I can both improve my fitness but also lower my stress levels. And I'm going to see if I feel better because I've done that. I'm going to see if I do that on a regular basis. Maybe I don't need as much blood pressure medicine in the future. Maybe I sleep better. Maybe my mood is better. I think there's a lot of reasons to address stress, and I hope this has been helpful for you. So I guess I'll be waiting for your questions. Take care.